Hi, Night Owls. Happy New Year! Now, I know a lot of us are ready to say goodbye to 2020. To put it bluntly, it sucked in a lot of different ways. But I always try to see a silver lining with every gray cloud. And the silver lining for my 2020 is that I had a lot of free time to read some books. I know some people like to do the whole book a week challenge every year, and I am not one of them, because I know I can't. One, some books take me too long to get through, and two, I just have a whole lot of other stuff on my plate a lot of the time. But 2020 gave me an opportunity to get through a variety of different books. And the cool thing is, I got even more books for Christmas. So on top of the ones I got to read last year, I have several more to look forward to this year. So I thought today I might give you a little breakdown of some of the things I got to read last year, and some of the things I'm looking forward to reading in 2021. So to start us off, there are always one or two books that I like to go back and revisit from time to time, whether they're old favorites, like my summer reread, or just something I read a long time ago and barely remember, but would like to reacquaint myself with. And one I always come back to every year come Christmas time is, of course, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. For several years, I had a tradition of reading it every December. But in recent years, due to schoolwork, I had been kind of slacking in that tradition. But I did finally get around to reading it all the way through once again this year. And each time I pick it up, I'm always surprised by how easy a read it actually is. It's just over 100 pages, and despite Dickens being a classic author, it's not filled with a lot of difficult, archaic language and phrases. And of course, it's just a timeless classic. I mean, how many reimaginings have been done of A Christmas Carol over the years? It also contains one of my favorite fourth wall breaks, in which Dickens claims that he is now a spirit sitting at your elbow while you read. How can you beat that? Now, another revisit I got to make in 2020 was a little book called Well Wished by Franny Billingsley. Now, this was one I first read back in elementary school, and picking up again years later, I am reminded of what being a little girl was like. Especially a little girl with a friend who truly demonstrates the saying, "With friends like these, who needs enemies?" And man, it was actually a little tough to get through. It's just so reminiscent of childhood and stubbornness, and just that kind of helpless indignation you have when you're a child and everything in the world seems against you. And it was hard, but it was really fun. I feel like I identified with the main character when I was younger, and just being able to get back into her shoes was a strange but welcoming escape. If all goes well, I will be talking a little bit more about this book sometime down the line in a segment of my podcast, which the plan is to launch in January. We'll see how that goes. But along with the revisits, there are also those books that I'm finally getting to. Meaning I've heard about them a lot from other readers, or else they're just so classic that every avid reader is expected to have read it. And due to one thing or another, I just took years to finally get to it. Now for me, the classic of 2020 that I finally got to was Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. Now, for those of you who read my review of the book, you'll know that my interest was first sparked when I went to go see the 2019 movie adaptation, and instantly fell in love, particularly with the character of Jo, who, again, reminded me very much of me. It was like a kindred spirit was there up on the screen. I had the opportunity to buy the book a few months later. I didn't hesitate. And kind of like what I got from Dickens, I expected a lot more archaic language and just a lot of that fancy speech that you tend to get with more classic authors. But again, I found myself really easily getting through Little Women. I loved all those girls just as much as I loved the characters that I saw on the movie screen. While I still adore the movie, the book is so delightful, and it includes so much more of those little details that just add to the character of these little women and the beauty of their relationships. Now, if you're not up for reading the book, I would suggest at least watch the movie, because the journey of these little women is well worth it. Now, the other finally read book on my 2020 list is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. Now, in the past, I had always read Stephen King's shorter works, and even then I'd only read like 2 or 3 of them. Salem's Lot is actually the first Stephen King novel that I have finished, and it didn't disappoint. I know some people are kind of iffy about his writing style, and I do see where a lot of people are coming from about his endings. And in all honesty, I'm not scared of vampires, like at all. I don't know, maybe Twilight ruined it for everyone. But in spite of my criticisms, I can also see why people like him so much, and why he is kind of the king of horror. Haha. Even though the vampire thing didn't really freak me out, I can see that he is very good at tension. And I am definitely looking forward to reading more of his works in the future. Now, a good portion of my reading tends to be the revisits, going back to old favorites or picking up something with just a vague memory. But 2020 was also able to introduce me to some new favorites along the way. Now, for my new favorites, I have one standalone in particular, and that's Uprooted by Naomi Novik. In fact, as far as new favorites go, I am including Naomi Novik as a favorite author, along with Catherine Arden, who is the author of my new favorite series, The Winter Night Trilogy. Now, these books stood out to me the most this year because both The Winter Night Trilogy and Uprooted offered me this perfect blend of beauty and darkness that I truly adore in fiction, especially Uprooted. There are times in Uprooted when I was actually deeply disturbed by what was happening, and it was great. I know that sounds weird, but for me, the darker something is, especially in a fantasy, the more fantastic and heart-wrenching and hopeful and inspiring the light parts are. And to find two new authors who demonstrated that so perfectly was truly the highlight of my reading this year. In fact, I did end up finishing 2020 with the finale of the Winter Night Trilogy, The Winter of the Witch. A perfect ending to a perfect trilogy, as well as the perfect book to end 2020. Now, before we move on to my goals for 2021, I do have a bonus title, something new that I picked up on toward the end of 2020, and it turned out to be kind of a surprise read for me. I guess because I didn't want to get my hopes up too much, and I kind of went into it with low expectations, and ended up really enjoying it. And my surprise read was Labyrinth Coronation by Simon Spurrier, Daniel Bayliss, and Dan Jackson. This book came as a surprise to me in several ways. While I enjoy graphic novels on occasion, they're not really my go-to type of book. But also, I am an enormous fan of Labyrinth. No, I'm obsessed. Pretty much anything Labyrinth related I will go for, except some of the spin-off stories that I've seen. I remember trying at one point to get into the manga series, Return to Labyrinth. It didn't really have the spirit of the original movie that so drew me in the first place. This did. And it's actually a prequel, not a sequel, which is probably part of what helps it maintain that overall spirit of the original movie. Because instead of someone just taking the story and then adding their own stuff onto it, they're actually working around something that already existed. In fact, it's cool because it kind of interacts with the movie. Basically, it's a story that Jareth is telling baby Toby while Sarah is traversing the labyrinth. And they're making it seem like it's an origin story for the Goblin King, but much like everything in the labyrinth, I'm not sure if everything is as it seems. I'm gonna have to read 2 and 3 to find out. But 2020 blessed me with the opportunity to read the first one. And 2 and 3 are soon gonna be on their way, because I'm dying to know what happens next.